I spent a lot of nights by myself when I was a kid. My mom was a single parent for a long time, an RN with brutal overnight shifts that ate half her life, and my older brother had already left for college. On paper, we were fine. Quiet neighborhood, good school, a house that looked safe from the street. On nights like this one, it felt safe until it didn't. It was a weekend. I'd had a girl over earlier, Molly. We watched 2 movies and pretended not to be awkward. Then she headed home because her parents were strict about curfew. The moment the door closed behind her, the house swallowed its own sounds. No TV chatter, no laughter spilling into the hallway. Just me, the refrigerator hum, and the subtle click of the thermostat. I went upstairs with a bowl of cereal because I was 14 and cereal counted as everything. Snack, meal, dessert, comfort. I flopped onto my bed and put something mindless on the TV. My bedroom window faces the backyard. The blinds were cranked halfway up to catch the last of the cold air. From that angle, I can see the deck and the line of dark yard beyond it. The fence, the shape of our neighbor's maple tree leaning over as if it was trying to hear secrets. When the sound came, it was small, wood scraping on wood. Not loud enough to make me jump, just loud enough to be wrong. I glanced at the TV, then at the window, then back at the TV, because the mind always tries to pick the softer thing. Then it happened again, just a little longer. A chair sliding. I set my bowl down and stood up to look. Someone was sitting on one of the deck chairs. I didn't think intruder first. I thought Molly, because she had just left and people forget things, and sometimes they come back for them. The person's head tilted like they were trying to see into the window. The porch light wasn't on, and my lamp was pointed away, so I had a little cover, enough to test the universe. I cracked the window an inch and called down, "Molly." The person looked up at me. It wasn't Molly. I stepped back from the window so fast the blind cords jittered and knocked against the wall. My heart did that trapped bird thing, slamming once, twice, then getting confused about what speed to use. I pressed my back to the wall beside the window and slid down until I was crouched there, breathing through my mouth so I wouldn't hear my own breath in my ears. Some part of me wanted this to be a dumb joke. I texted our group chat. I kept it vague at first, then stopped being vague. "If this is you, it's not funny." The replies rolled in. Nobody was near my street. Nobody was with Molly. Nobody was pranking me. The one person who might have joked like that had her phone on airplane mode by 11 because her parents checked. I could have grabbed my phone and called right then. But the window was cracked open an inch, and the screen glowed like a tiny lighthouse. I didn't want that light to hit the glass and give me away. I didn't want the person on the deck to hear me moving. That was the logic I built in those seconds. Stay still. Make no sound. Maybe he'll think I'm not in the room. I waited 5 minutes that felt like 10. I told myself he'd be gone. I told myself I would get one quick peek and then laugh at myself and go back to my show. I rose slow, keeping my shoulder against the wall, and let one eye clear the window frame. He was still there. He was looking up at my window. There are different kinds of cold. There's the kind the night air keeps and the kind you keep. The kind that moves in and sits behind your sternum. That's the one I got. I don't know why I didn't duck back out of sight this time. I stood there and tried to sound like the sort of person you wouldn't mess with. It didn't work. My voice cracked on the first word. "What do you want?" His shoulders started to bounce. Not his whole body, just the shoulders, like he was laughing hard, but there was no sound. The only thing that came up to me from the deck was a thin wheeze, like someone trying to laugh through a whistle. "Please go away," I said. It wasn't brave. It was exactly the opposite of brave. I shut the window, pulled the blinds down, and backed away from that side of the room until my calves hit the bed frame. Then I sat and hugged my knees and tried to think like someone older than 14. "Call the police," a voice in my head said. The other voice said, "He hasn't done anything yet." The first voice said, "He is in your yard." The second voice said, "You'll be a bother." The first voice said, "You'll be a headline." I didn't call. I can tell you that without trying to defend it. I didn't call. I left my room and sat at the top of the stairs where I could hear the house. We have that kind of split-level landing where sound travels strangely. It makes the front door seem closer and the back door seem farther away, even though they're the same distance if you measure it. I sat there and tried to understand the night with my ears. Something pushed the back door inward against the lock. The sound was quiet and absolute, the rubber weather strip squeaking, the deadbolt holding. A pause. Then it pushed again, and again. Not like a battering ram, like a shoulder that didn't know its own strength, testing the angle, reading the wood grain. He was trying to get into the house. I ran. I ran back to my room on the careful, loud feet of someone who wants to be quiet but isn't. I shut the door as softly as I could and held the doorknob like my hand could keep anyone from turning it on the other side. The house listened with me. The pressure moved. You could feel it. The way a storm moves through your ribs before it finds your roof. The front doorknob jiggled, not frantic, curious, metal on metal. A shoulder bumped the door once, then twice, then nothing. If our doors hadn't been locked, I don't like to imagine this story. If 14-year-old me had left the window open an extra inch, I don't like to imagine that story either. I pulled the curtains tight until the room was a rectangle of darker dark. I slid down the door and sat on the rug and tried to breathe like normal people breathe. Minutes turned into something mushy and uncountable. At some point, I lay down with my arm for a pillow and stared at the glowing red of the alarm clock numbers. They changed and changed and changed. Exhaustion collected like silt. I must have fallen asleep, which sounds impossible when I tell it now. But the body does what it needs to do when the mind breaks its own loop. I woke up to daylight sneaking through the edges of the curtains. For a flicker of time, I had that dream-after feeling, where you think your life is normal again. I sat up fast and the world sharpened around the edges. I cracked the curtain an inch. The deck was empty. The yard was empty. The maple tree looked like a simpler thing again. It was just after 9 when my mom came home. I heard the garage door first, then the thump of her bag on the counter, then the tired sigh of a person who had been needed all night by strangers and was finally allowed to be a person again. I ran downstairs and told her everything. I told her about the man in the deck chair, the way he looked up at my window, the silent laugh that had a wheeze in it, the back door pushing, the front door testing, the hours of nothing afterward, the way I sat there and did not call. She got furious in the way scared people get furious. Not at him, at me. "Why didn't you call 911?" she asked, already reaching for the landline that we barely used except for her hospital and the school and the one aunt who refused to text. "Why didn't you call?" I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. Maybe it was being 14. Maybe it was not wanting to be the kid who overreacts. Maybe it was the part of me that thought if I kept the night quiet enough, the night would keep me too. She checked the doors and then checked them again. The deadbolts were solid. The frames looked the same. There were no footprints on the deck, not that we could see. Just the scuffs from our own chairs getting dragged around by us and by wind and by the small months of a normal life. We stood there in daylight and looked at the chair where he'd sat and the glass where he'd looked and the place where the back door weather strip had done its job. The house didn't have any answers. Houses rarely do. They keep their own counsel and our echoes. The day burned itself off the way days do. My mom napped and then made coffee and then asked if I wanted pancakes, which is the kind of question you ask when you can't fix anything but still need to feed your kid. We ate at the counter because the table felt like too much space. She told me stories from work that were sanitized for home, and I pretended they made me feel better. In the afternoon, the neighbor's dog yapped at something normal, and I was grateful for normal. I think about that night more than I want to. I think about the scraping chair, and the way he stared up at the window without moving, and the thin wheeze that was almost a laugh. I think about how long he sat there after I closed the blinds, like the act of closing them had given him permission to stay. I think about how he tried the back door first, as if that was polite, and the front door next, as if that was strategy. I think about how he left only when the night had finished with me. When you're a kid, you want rules that work. If I'm good, bad things won't happen. If I lock the door, I'm safe. If I keep quiet, the dark will ignore me. Sometimes those rules hold and sometimes they don't. And learning which is a kind of growing up that no one claps for. I lock everything now, even when I'm not alone, especially when I'm not alone. I check the deck before I sleep, not because I expect to see anything, but because I have to be the person who checks. I keep the porch light bulbs fresh, and I press my hand against the door at night to feel the deadbolts sure little bravery. And when I hear wood scrape on wood, even if I'm sure it's the wind, I don't stand at the window and try to be brave in a way that doesn't work. I turn on the lights, and I make the call. If you want to know what I remember most about him, it's this: he didn't hurry. He didn't pound or shout or rattle the handle like a movie. He sat. He watched. He breathed wrong. He let the house tell him about me, what my window looked like from the yard, how my light fell across the blinds, how long I would wait before looking again. I hate that patience. I hate that it works. Sometimes when the backyard is quiet and the air is that particular kind of cold that carries sound too easily, I can hear a ghost of that wheeze in the fence line. It isn't real. I know it isn't. It's the creak of wood in winter. It's the neighbor's dog playing a bone like a flute. It's anything but what it was, but I hear it. And hearing it is enough to move me through the old steps. Lock, check, breathe, call. I don't tell this story to scare anyone. I tell it because a 14-year-old me needed someone to say the simple things out loud. You are not a bother. You are not making it up. It is okay to turn on every light in the house. It is okay to call for help before something happens. How many times do we get to decide the shape of a night? Not many, not enough. But this is one of them. If you are alone and you hear wood scrape on wood and you look out and someone you love is not who you see, don't run the script I ran. Don't try to be the kind of brave that hides. Be the kind that flips switches and wakes neighbors and says the numbers in order. Be the kind that lives to feel silly about it later. I was lucky. The locks were set. The doors were stubborn. The window was only open an inch. My mom came home at 9 and got angry and made pancakes and made me say the words I should have said at midnight. The world kept turning. The maple tree bent its ear to simpler secrets again. But some nights, when I lie in the same room in a different house with better windows and a smarter thermostat, and a grown-up lock I paid for myself, I think about that boy and that deck and that laugh that didn't sound like a laugh. I think about how small I tried to make myself. I think about how big the yard got when I couldn't see it. And then I get up. I walk the house. I touch the doors. I look at the deck chair and let it scrape an inch across the boards with my foot, just to steal the sound back. I stand at the window, not to invite anything, but to tell the night who lives here. I turn on the lights, and if I need to, I make the call.